Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 361. It was a winning weekend in Miami for the Brewers. Couldn't get the sweep on Sunday, even though you had Miz on the mound. It just kind of keeps being a little bit of an up and down beginning to the year. You win 8 of your first 10. We're going to the World Series, everybody. Then you lose 6 in a row. Season's over. Let's get ready for training camp. And then they win 4 in a row. All right, we're back in the World Series. And they lose on Sunday. Just one bad inning from Mizorowski, and the offense really couldn't get on track yesterday. But you're going to have that when you don't have Yelly or Vaughn or Churio. And Murphy talked about that in the postgame. They just couldn't quite get it done in a 5-3 loss. But what a debut from Coleman Crow on Friday, one of the up-and-coming pitchers in the system, a guy they got from David Stearns. One of the first David Stearns trades when he went to New York was to send Coleman Crow to Milwaukee as a parting gift, I guess. And he was tremendous on Friday night, making his debut. They sent him right back down, but I think we will see him again this year. Then Woodruff had probably one of his best starts in the last 3 years, including injury years. 7 innings of one-run ball, touching 96 on that fastball on Saturday in a win. And then you lose on Sunday, but the Brewers get out of the weekend with a 12-9 record. They're in last place, by the way. 12-9 in dead last place in the NL Central. That's what the NL Central has been like so far this year. The Brewers and Cubs are tied for last. Both teams are 3 games over 500. That's where we're at right now in that division. We'll break that down. I do want to play you a clip of Giannis. I know we've talked a lot about the Bucks in the postmortem, and we have no movement as of yet on a coach. Although I did get an email on allowing an email about who should select the head coach and John Horst and what sounds like were the Horst decisions during the Budenholzer fallout. Every choice that Horst wanted to make, they went in a different direction, and Horst probably would have been right 2 times. And management, who maybe overruled him, were incorrect both times with both Griffin and Doc. We can hit on that a little bit. Giannis was on another NBA podcast, the Goran Dragic podcast, who tormented the Bucks when he was in the NBA, and then spent his last year with the Bucks coming off the bench for 10 games in 2023. But Giannis was on his podcast talking about things he could have done differently this year, and one of them is the most obvious answer of all time, but it was fun to hear him articulate how he should have shut down the trade rumors more emphatically during the course of the year. We'll play that audio. We'll also talk about the Badgers. Big weekend for Gard and the transfer portal. Gets a couple of guards, gets a forward, a rebounding forward who blocks shots, who doesn't need to hit threes. We talked about that, didn't we, at the end of the year? So he went out and got one of those guys. I do want to touch a little bit on the NBA and NHL playoffs, which got underway this weekend. Just an amazing crowd pop in Buffalo, their first playoff game in the NHL playoffs in 15 years. They score 4 goals in 5 minutes in the third period, and the crowd sounded like a late 90s Attitude-era WrestleMania pop. And we'll hit a little bit on the Packer draft as well, or the NFL draft. Does it feel like the NFL draft is happening this week? It doesn't to me. This feels like the lowest publicity draft that I've experienced in the last 10 to 15 years. Maybe because the Packers don't have a first-round pick. Maybe because it's not in Green Bay this year, obviously, like it was last year. So there was a lot of build-up to it. But it just doesn't feel like it's NFL draft week. We'll talk about that, too. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. Hit time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown, Wisconsin, record-breaking run.
Morgan a smash up the middle, base hit to center. Here comes Gomez, around third, a throw and the Brewers win.
Here's the snap, he looks, he throws, it's complete intercepted, and there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, on a pinnacle ball, throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Welcome in Monday morning. Like, rate, subscribe if you can. If you would do me the pleasure, like, rate, and subscribe. And yeah, the more ratings we get, even if they're not great, the more ratings we get, the better it is for us. So if you can do that, however you consume the podcast, Spotify, iHeart, Apple, whatever, just give us a quick star rating. You just close your eyes and do it. I don't care. I honestly don't care. Close your eyes, click on one. We can do rate roulette. Click on a 1-star, a 5-star, however it ends up. But just make sure you do that if you can. It does help the podcast out quite a bit. Now, welcome into your Monday. Hope everybody had a good weekend out there. And I think we basically spent, well, my wife spent the entire weekend. I was outside doing yard work and things like that. It was one of those things where, you know, when you get into the domestic suburban life, and we kind of got into a few years ago during the pandemic because there was nothing else to do and there was no sports. I kind of became lawn guy for a while. I wouldn't say I'm as militant now as I was then when there was literally nothing else to do and I would just go outside 8 hours a day on Saturday and Sunday. I got a seed spreader. I was putting fertilizer down and weed eater and trimming, and I had all the edging. I was doing it all. I'm not taking it to that level anymore, but it is interesting in that world, in the suburban lawn care world. The first person that goes, you know, when it gets to be a little nicer out and we had all that rain, so the grass is growing a little quicker, a little earlier maybe than when it would. I'm not a no-mow May guy. I can't be a no-mow May guy. Even though it might be good for the yard, even though it might be good for the bees, I think the bees are on their own. The bees have survived for millions of years. The bees will continue to survive without me not cutting my lawn. But it is interesting in our neighborhood, and I think this is true of a lot of neighborhoods, when you get to this first weekend or the first couple of weeks where you could maybe fire up the lawnmower, everybody's kind of waiting to see who the first one to go is. And then the second you hear that lawnmower, I want to say not my direct neighbors, but one of my neighbors maybe halfway up the block, it was Sunday morning at about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. You heard the gentle hum of a lawnmower, and then everybody the rest of the day. All right, now we go. Now we're doing yard stuff. Everybody's holding on to see, can we buy one more full weekend without dedicating a full day or 2 days to trimming trees and edging and trimming and lawn care and gardening and all that stuff? Can we buy one more free weekend? Then somebody has to go at 8:45 on a Sunday morning, and then it was like a domino effect. All right, we're going. I guess we're going. So I was doing that. My wife, though, is getting started on a room remodel we are doing. We've been in our house now since 2017. We have not done a ton to it. I know some people, there's different levels of motivation there for some people when you move in. Do you do a bunch of stuff right away to kind of make it your own? Do you rehab this? Do you tear down that? Do you redo a bathroom? Do you redo a kitchen? We have been very slow on the draw with this house. At our older house, we redid a kitchen. We did a bunch of stuff. We actually had a list. On it was arson was the number one thing on the list. Once we started making the list at the first house of things we felt like we wanted to do or things we had to do, at the bottom I just put -arson. Maybe insurance fraud. Is that crazy? But we ended up doing, I think we had 10 things on that list, and over the course of 6 or 7 years, we did almost all of them. I think we did almost 8 or 9 of them. The one thing we didn't do was pave a driveway and build a garage, but that was about it. Everything else we did. But this house, we've been a little slower on the draw with that kind of stuff. So earlier in the year, we bought a bedroom set. Our own bedroom set, not a hand-me-down, not an IKEA that's been making the rounds from college dorms. Legitimately, one of the chest of drawers we have in our house is still the IKEA chest of drawers I got in Stevens Point in 2004 or wherever, 2005. So we're not doing any of that anymore. We're getting our own not adult, you know what I mean. Not an adult bedroom set, an adult bedroom set. And a big kid bedroom set. Let's phrase it that way, phrasing. So we ordered that and spent a pretty penny on it, and then they delivered it about a month ago, and we had to go rent a cart. We didn't have a hand cart in the house. I don't know how we didn't have. We should have just bought one. But we have a hardware store literally 4 blocks from our house. We rented a hand cart for $7 for an hour and drove it back and got everything moved inside. But then it's all just been sitting inside. Like wherever it landed, that's where it's been for about a month. And we've been delaying the inevitable of starting all right, get all the old crap out of the bedroom. We're going to take down, there's a wallpaper border in there that's been there forever. Got to take that down, which is a pain in the ass if you've ever removed wallpaper. I helped her in a couple of other bedrooms in our guest room and the now office, and they all had it. Everything on the second level of our house, or the third level, I guess, tri-level. Every bedroom. There are 3 bedrooms up there. One's an office for us now. One's a guest bedroom. One's our room. They all had wallpaper border. Thank God it wasn't wallpaper, like full-on wall-to-wall wallpaper. How long does that take? If you have a whole room, it's taken us so long just to get these wallpaper borders down. And I'd say they're not even a foot in length right at the top of the wall in the room. And every room had a kind of a different theme to its wallpaper border. They take forever. I can't imagine how long it would take you to take down wallpaper of an entire wall if it just covered the whole wall. So my wife took the bull by the horns this weekend and got that started. Got stuff out of the bedroom, ripped off the first part of the wallpaper. But if you've removed wallpaper or wallpaper border, you know that's not the hardest part. The hardest part is all the glue and the gunk that's under it. So she has this kind of humidifier. I don't even know what you would call it. I think that's what it's kind of called, like a hand humidifier. You hold that up there. It's supposed to make things soft or loosen them up, and you scrape it off. So she was working on that all weekend. God bless her. And she's not taking any shortcuts. I was cursed with marrying somebody who wants to do things the right way. Like, do you have that problem in your relationship? Like, there are probably shortcuts we could take. At some point, we probably don't need to remove every scrap of glue. If it were just up to me, I'd probably end up painting over some of it. And if you can tell that, then fine. Then good on you. How many people are going to be in this bedroom either way? So I would be somebody who might seek out a shortcut or two when it comes to wallpaper border removal, painting, priming, all that kind of stuff. But she is not. And she's right. She is right, by the way. To do it, if you're going to spend, and we're going to end up spending between the bedroom set, the bed, the paint, and everything, it's going to be $5,000-$6,000 before all is said and done, probably more. So if you're going to do that, and this is the only time we're doing it, do it right. Make sure you get all the glue off. Make sure you clean the walls before you paint them, and take all the time to prep for painting, which takes way more time than actually painting. Make sure you get all the tape down, all that good stuff. So she does it the right way, but it is a process, and it's not as fun. When we remodeled the kitchen in our old house, you get a demo day. Demo days are fun. Demo days are the best. Demo days, it's like a rage room. By the way, side note, I invented rage rooms 20 years ago, but I didn't have the financing or anybody that could make it happen. But as I was spitballing ideas when I was in high school or maybe even in early college, I came up with the rage room idea. Now they're everywhere. There's even a rage room in Sheboygan taunting me as I drive to my mom's house on the north side. I have to drive past it every day. You can ask any of my friends. It was like Kramer with the beach. That's how I feel with the beach cologne. It smells like something. The beach. I had the rage room idea. You could ask any of my friends. Ask them. I'm going to give you their phone number right now. I'm going to give you their personal numbers. I had that idea when I was 17 or 18 years old of a room where you would go and pay, and we'd go get crappy stuff from the Salvation Army or Goodwill, just easily breakable, old things nobody wanted, put them in a room, give you a baseball bat, and you can work some stuff out. We'll close the door. You can play some rage music, play some Limp Bizkit break stuff on repeat, and you can just go to town and get your stresses out and have that release of damaging a bunch of stuff, and it's not at your house, and then you can leave the rage room, we clean it up, and you pay by the hour, and then I came up with that idea, and now it's a whole big thing. Anyway, but that's fun. I mean, a demo day is fun. I remember when we did that in the kitchen in our old house. Yeah, you get the sledgehammer out, everything that's been bothering you about this room that you look at every day that just agitates you, you get to take a giant sledgehammer and just demolish it recklessly. It's the best. But you don't really get that when you're taking wallpaper border down. There's no way to aggressively take wallpaper border down where you're working out some stuff as you're doing it. But she was doing that most of the weekend, and I think that'll carry into this weekend. And yeah, then you got the painting process, and you got to clean the walls. We got to take the ceiling fan down. We got to buy a new ceiling fan at some point here too. But it is a process to do it right, but we'll do it right, I guess. Yeah, or she'll do it right. So I was outside because I'm one of those guys too. I would just slow her down, and we only had one of the humidifier things anyway, so she was kind of on her own listening to music. I think she was actually fine with that. I told her Saturday night after she started it, we went out to dinner, and I said, I was going to go up there and help you a little bit more, but I just figured I'd get in your way. I'd slow you down. She said, yeah, pretty much. So that was happening for us this weekend, and the first yard work of the year. But hope it was a good weekend for everybody out there. Let's start with the Brewer weekend in Miami, shall we? Hey, cue the music. Brewers were. What a song. What a jam. I have this CD, I regret to inform you. Big Willie style. I'm not proud of that one. I'm not proud of the fact that somewhere in some room in some CD tower, I have that CD. I think I probably got it as one of those buy 10 CDs for $1 on BMG or Columbia House back in the day, and then they own the rights to your firstborn 15 years down the road. They're at the delivery room, and they have the contract in their hands. They remember when you got that Hootie and the Blowfish CD in 1996? Yoink! We'll be taking this. Well, okay, I signed the contract, I guess. Everybody's crying. Anyway, but remember those that you'd always see those inserts in magazines, $1 for 10 CDs, and I think I actually got that Will Smith CD. What's the album? Oh, here's a question for you. We should do this on the B93 morning show. In fact, let me write this down because I'm going to forget it. This is like another Seinfeld reference, the Flaming Loaves. I do this all the time. This is why I keep scrap paper. This is why on my phone I have a text chain with myself that anytime an idea for the blog, for the podcast, any on-air topic that pops into my head, if I don't write it down right away, I'll forget about it, and then I'll be driving to work tomorrow, and I'll think, what the heck did I want to do on the air today? And it will agitate me to the point where I have to go to a rage room. Mulaney did. Anyway, so we got to write this down. All right, the CD album you're most embarrassed to own. All right. Now, you think, what would you say is yours? You can say it right now to the podcast. Imagine if I could hear it. How the hell did he do that? What's the album that you're most embarrassed that you own? That's on my short list, even though, what was all on that album? Will Smith, was it, I think it was Big Willie style. He's got it's got a blue cover. What is the track listing on this? Now, in my defense, it probably was a part of the get 12 CDs for $1 or $2. So I wasn't paying a lot for that one. And in my defense, this is, I think, a multi-platinum album, so I wasn't the only one. Yeah, released in November of 1998. It had Miami on it. It had Getting Jiggy With It was on it. I Got Jiggy With It. I don't know what other these things are. Miami, Yes, Yes, Y'all. It's look, Just the Two of Us is on here. The Austin Powers remix is always good. Oh, Men in Black is on here. Yeah, this is a multi-platinum album. Even though millions of other people bought it, not just me, it is one of the more embarrassing albums that I own. The other one that I'd put on that list, honest to God, I think this is the first CD I bought when my parents got me a Magnavox boombox with bass boost. Remember we talked about anti-skip protection for whatever reason a few podcasts ago? Bass boost was also a figment of your imagination where you would push that and it did absolutely nothing, but you kind of felt like, oh, I got a bass boost on here. So when they got me my first boombox with a CD player and bass boost, which I think is still sitting in the garage somewhere, one of the first CDs I bought was a CD, the band was called the Rembrandts, and the Rembrandts, what did they do, John? All the Rembrandts ever did was the Friends theme, I'll Be There For You. And I guess I like that so much, I like the theme song to Friends so much that I bought that CD. That is embarrassing. I'm actually embarrassed for myself just saying that out loud. What is the album you are most embarrassed to own? Those two are on my short list. Will Smith, Big Willie style, and the Rembrandts. I don't even know what the name of the album was. Anyway, Brewers were in Miami over the weekend, and we got a nice weekend up until Sunday, and it really wasn't even that bad on Sunday, just a really bad first inning from Jacob Mizorowski. Let's start on Friday. How about Coleman Crow? So Coleman Crow made his debut on Friday because Kyle Harrison had hurt his knee or tweaked his knee his last start. They pushed him back to this Detroit series. So Harrison was not going to make his scheduled start, so they had an opening. They had a one-day spot start kind of deal, and they call up Coleman Crow from AAA Nashville. Now, that might not be a name you know or don't know, but we predicted it on the Friday podcast, right? We thought that the Croning would be taking the mound, and he did, and he was tremendous. So the big thing with Coleman Crow is he's got a nasty curveball with a lot of drop on it. Back in the day, they used to call it a 12-to-6 curveball, like an analog clock. 12. It moved from 12 to 6. That's how sharp the drop was. I used to love that. In MLB The Show back in the day, when I was playing video games more regularly on PlayStation, I would love on an MVP Baseball 04, MVP Baseball 05, I would love a guy that could drop a big old curveball, drop it right at the top or the bottom of the zone. I love pitchers like that. Feels like that's kind of gone away, and it's just more of a cutter world now and a two-seamer, and it's all about velocity, but a good old-fashioned hook, those were dynamite pitchers back in the day on video games back in the 03, 04 when I was listening to Big Willie style. When we were in that era of video games, those guys were unhittable in those games. And screwball pitchers were too. God bless you if you had to face Tim Wakefield in MVP Baseball 2005. But he has a nasty curveball. And I just haven't seen, they call it an Uncle Charlie. I haven't seen a hook like that in a long, long time. So they talked about that in the pregame. Then I'm watching the game, and he busts it out right away in the first inning. It's like his signature pitch. I thought, ooh, my God, I haven't seen a curveball, a hammer drop like that in a while. He's got a lot of sick movement on it and some really good spin rate. And he was dynamite. His whole family was there. They were going nuts. He goes 5 1/3. He only gives up, Well, he left having only given up one run. Then DL Hall kind of burned him by giving up an inherited runner. So he ends up going 5 1/3, only 2 runs given up, 4 strikeouts. He just looked confident. He looked like a guy who knew what he was doing. He wasn't overwhelmed. At the end of the game, he said he was shaking like a leaf out there the second he took the mound, but that did not come through when we watched the game on TV. It just looked like he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was on the attack. William Contreras had a firm grasp of what his arsenal was. He was mixing pitches beautifully. It was a nice, encouraging start from Coleman Crowe. Sometimes you get these spot starts from guys. They'll get called up for a game. Look, we got to fill in one guy, and they have a good start. Then they go back down, which Coleman Crowe did on Saturday, but they need a fresh arm. He was never going to stick, even though he looked really good. He was never going to come up on Friday and then just be a part of the rotation going forward. He was always going to go back down and bring a fresh arm up on Saturday. But sometimes you get a guy like that and you watch a game where a pitcher from AAA is making a spot start or a AA starter is making a spot start, and they look good, but you can kind of tell they're getting a little lucky, a lot of hard-hit balls, but they're right at people, some good defensive plays. You can sort of tell on the eye test whether or not this is a legit good start and we're going to see this guy again, or this guy's going to go back to AAA tomorrow and we may never hear from him again. We'll hear from Coleman Crowe again. Coleman Crowe came to Milwaukee from David Stearns. That was one of the first trades that Stearns made when he went to New York. So Stearns had that year. That was so weird when you think about it. 2022, that year where they were in first place all year, then they blew it at the end of the year. They traded Hader, made no other moves at the deadline. It made no sense. That was sort of Stearns' last hurrah as Brewer GM. And then he had that weird year where he was under contract in 23, but he wasn't really doing anything. He was like an advisor to Matt Arnold, who at that point was the GM. And then Stearns left after that year. And in the winter of 23, one of the first trades he made was with Matt Arnold, where he sent the Brewers Coleman Crowe in exchange for Adrian Hauser and Tyrone Taylor. And Crowe had been sort of ascending since then. He's 24, 25 years old, AAA this year. And that was a great debut on Friday. I think there's something there. I don't think we've seen the last of Coleman Crowe, maybe not even this year. We might see more of him this year. But he was really good. Now, DL Hall did blow it for him. He had the lead, and eventually it becomes a 4-3 game, and then Zerpa gave up a run, so it's tied. They go to extras. Brewers put 3 on the board in extras. Eventually, Trevor McGill, or was it Uribe? No, McGill had to come on. McGill got the save on Friday. So after the horrible effort against Tampa last Friday, or 2 Fridays ago, and then the meltdown against Boston, the meltdown against, who did they play? Blue Jays, Toronto. The meltdown on Tuesday, he gets back on the horse on Thursday and has the clean 8th inning, and then he had a clean 10th inning as a part of that save, gave up 1 hit, had a couple of strikeouts, got the save as the Brewers won that game 7-5. Then you come back on Saturday, Brandon Woodruff. Okay. That's as good as he's looked now. He had good numbers last year when he came back from the major shoulder surgery before the lat injury. He was, 23, he was hurt all year until the end of the year. Then he was healthy and pitching well. Then he got hurt before the postseason. Then he was out the entirety of 24, came back last year, 7-2 record in 12 starts with a 3.2 ERA. That's pretty damn good. And then he hurt his lat and he missed the playoffs and missed the final month of the year. But when you go back to any start from 25, and even toward the tail end of 23, I think Saturday's start was one of his best in totality in that window, that 2.5, 3-year window with the injury. 7 innings of 1-run ball. He was working the corners, the velocity. He got a couple that people were talking about on Twitter, and we all thought, oh, okay. You know, we often talk about with Brandon Woodruff how the days of him throwing 97, 98, 99, which he did consistently. If you go back to 2018, 19, 20, 21, he was throwing 98, 99 with regularity on that fastball. And with the shoulder injury and all the different injuries he's had, he's 33 years old now. We just feel like that's never going to come back. And it may not come back to that level, but he had been kind of living last year and this year so far in the 92, 93, maybe 94 range. On Saturday, maybe it was the humid weather, and the soupy weather in Florida got him warmed up or got his joints loose or whatever. He was touching 96 on the corner. Again, not the 98, 99, but that's the first time I think we've seen 96 from Woodruff since that major shoulder surgery. He tosses 7 innings of 1-run ball on Saturday, just dominant. And the pitch count was low this time, instead of like they did against the Nationals when my wife and I were there last Sunday. They let him roll out there for the 7th inning. He got the job done there. And the Brewer offense gave him more than enough, had a 5-1 lead. They gave up 1 run in the 9th inning. Uribe had to come on. They tried to get Jake Woodford to get them 2 innings at the end so they could save all the high leverage arms. Woodford got through the 8th, but he's one of those guys. If you get a clean inning, Woodford is he's the garbage man. Woodford, I would say they picked up right before the year. He's the last guy in the bullpen. He's the guy where if you're up 5 runs or down 5 runs, you need somebody to go out there and eat up an inning or 2. He's the guy, and that's fine. And that's, hey, that feels like I'm downplaying it, but he's pitching in Major League Baseball, okay? If that's your role, that's not a bad role to have. You're playing a professional sport. Yeah, you're the mop-up guy of the bullpen, but you are pitching in Major League Baseball. And he had a scoreless 8th inning. They wanted to get it through where they didn't have to use any of their high-leverage guys and buy 2 innings out of him, but that's tough to do. He gave up 3 hits in the 9th inning, so Uribe had to come on. Uribe got the save then on Saturday in a 5-2 win. Then you came out on Sunday looking for a sweep, so you lost 6 in a row, then you won 4 in a row, and you're looking for a road sweep, and you've got your ace on the mound in Jacob Mizorowski. He just had a really bad first inning. He goes walk, which is never good. The leadoff walk to start the game always bites you. Leadoff walks almost always bite you in any inning, but especially to begin the game or in a high-leverage situation late. They never ends well. But he walks a guy, then a hit, then an error on the infield, then a wild pitch, and that scored the first run of the game. And then Pat Murphy walked out there. Pat Murphy, just the demeanor, just his demeanor when he hopped out of the dugout and walked to the mound. BA, I think, on the TV broadcast said, oh boy, someone's going to get dressed out here. This is going to be a one-way conversation. That's exactly what it was. You could tell the looks on the faces of the guys, of Miz on the mound, and all the infield came in. You could kind of tell as they were watching him walk out there that this was going to be a stern talking to. I remember when I was a kid, I think we all had, our parents had things where you knew, ooh, this is serious. I remember my dad always had, we didn't get yelled at a lot for anything really, but my dad had a loud whistle, like the 2 fingers in your mouth whistle, and when we heard that with the zip at the end, I can't even do it. I can't even come close to the volume he had. When we heard that, then my sister and I knew, oh boy, we're in trouble. Whatever we did here, we are in trouble. I didn't do it, she did it. And it had that look. Murphy just had that look of an angry parent walking to the mound, and BA was kind of chuckling and saying, this is going to be a one-way talk, and that's exactly what it was. He did all the talking, and then he ignored for a while. When you have a meeting on the mound, at some point, the home plate umpire can't go on indefinitely. He'll walk out there and break it up and send everybody back. Typically, as the umpire is getting close to the mound, whatever manager or pitching coach that's out there, they'll notice that and break it up pretty quickly. The home plate umpire came up, and Murphy just ignored him for a good 30 seconds, too, and kept on whatever lesson he was teaching out there. So that was a pretty firm get your bleep together after you went walk, single, error, wild pitch, and you're down 1-0 without recording it out. It just looked kind of helter-skelter out there, and Murphy went out there and tried to calm things down. And he said post-game, he told him, look, lock it in. Let's lock it in. Give up another run or 2, that's fine, we'll come back, but just get it together here. That was the message to him. And he did after that. Now, they did give up a few more runs. 3-run first inning for Miami. After that, Miz was great. Didn't give up a run the rest of the day, had 9 strikeouts, and only one of those runs was earned of the 3 because of the error by Hamilton at shortstop. But you put yourself in a 3-0 hole. Eventually, they get down 5-1. And then you had Sanchez hit a 2 RBI single with 2 outs and the bases loaded in the 8th inning, made it 5-3. And then you had runners at the corners with 2 down, and William Contreras pinch hitting, one of the best bats you have in the lineup. He lined out, though. He just missed one lined out, and then the Brewers went 1-2-3 in the 9th inning, and they fell 5-3 in the finale. But a 4-game winning streak after the 6-game losing streak. You win a road series. You'd love to have gotten the sweep, but anytime you win a series, especially on the road, you feel good. And the Brewers come out of Sunday with a 12-9 record. As we said in the teaser, that is good for last place in the division. We've talked about this quite a bit in the opening weeks of the season on the podcast. This NL Central is just nuts to butts. You've got the Reds on a 3-game winning streak. The Cardinals are on a 5-game winning streak in a rebuild year. The Pirates are 4 games under 500. The Cubs have won 5 in a row. So right now, the Cubs and Brewers are tied for last place with identical 12-9 records. That would lead... The Cubs or Brewers would lead the AL Central or the AL West right now with a 12-9 record, but they're tied for last place. The Reds are 14-8. The Cardinals are 13-8. The Pirates are 13-9. The Cubs are 12-9. The Brewers are 12-9. It is not often, I don't care how early you are in the year, where you're 3 games over 500 and you're sitting in last place staring up at everybody. But that's one of the reasons you don't look at the standings too much this early in the year. That's going to work itself out at some point. I don't think all 5 teams in the NL Central are going to finish above 500. That would be a feat, though. Day off today for the Brewers, and they're coming back on Tuesday for the second half of this 6-game road trip, first of 3 in Detroit. Brewers have a pretty daunting task at the end of this week. They've got, God bless, a 5:40 start time. You love to see it. You love to see that on Tuesday and Wednesday, 5:40 p.m. first pitches. So Kyle Harrison back on the mound Tuesday. Chad Patrick goes on Wednesday. And Detroit's a pretty good team. Detroit is expected to be, I think they're predicted to win the AL Central. Where are they in the AL Central right now? They're a half game back. Guardians are 13-10. The Tigers are 12-10. They are the predicted, before the year began, this was the team predicted to win the AL Central, the old home of the Brewers. But you've got Harrison and Patrick going on Tuesday, Wednesday. Then the Brewers have Sproat on the mound Thursday, and Tarek Skubal is on the other side for Detroit. Skubal won the Cy Young in the American League last year. And then a day later, you've got the Pirates at American Family Field. This is the first, by the way, Friday will be the first division series the Brewers have played this year. It's been a weird scheduling year where they have played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Detroit will be 6. 6 of their 8 series have been against American League teams to begin the year. Only the National Series and the Miami Series have been against NL teams. But they then on Friday have the Pirates at home and Paul Skeens is on the mound. So back-to-back, you get on Thursday the American League Cy Young Award winner in Skubal. Then on Friday you're home with the National League Cy Young Award winner in Skeens. That is a tough one, too. If you split those, God, if you won them both. If you split those, if you can find a way to get one of those, go 1-1 against Skubal and Skeens, I think you feel okay about that. That is a tough back-to-back. But we'll talk more about the Skeens matchup and the Pirates matchup on Friday's podcast. But just a preview of that, Thursday Skubal, Friday Skeens. It does sound like Quinn Priester maybe late this week is going to be sent out on a rehab assignment. That would be great to get a 13-game winner back, obviously. I don't think we're a whole lot closer than we were when we recorded on Friday to getting Churio back or Vaughn or Yelly. Yelly's the furthest out now. The hope is Vaughn in mid-May. And now we kind of thought when Churio went down, I do feel like there was some speculation that he would be back around this week or maybe next week, but it's sounding more and more like what we originally predicted. I think if you go back to the podcast we had on opening day, didn't we think in all of our medical opinions here, not a doctor, didn't we think it was going to be after Cinco de Mayo? I'm almost certain we said that. I feel like that is where we're trending now with Churio. He is working out, and I think he's getting closer to taking some BP, but he's still a little ways away. You've got at least 2 weeks until you get Churio back, probably 4 until Vaughn, and maybe 6 yet until you get Yelly back. But hopefully some reinforcements are on the way. Murphy talked about that post-game, too. He said, look, we lost the game. We won the series. We're 12-9. He said to the reporters, you guys can see it. We are a mash unit right now. We're missing 3 of our best 5 bats. We're missing our number 2 starter heading into the year. We're missing a high-leverage lefty out of the bullpen in Koenig. We've talked about it. There are excuses, but then there is reality. And at some point, you're not going to be able to overcome that amount of injuries to key guys. So what Murphy's message, I feel like, to the fans at the end of yesterday's game was, hey, we won a series. We're 12-9. We've got a ton of guys we're missing. We're just trying to keep our head above water in an ultra-competitive division, clearly. Just try to keep our head above water, keep swimming here until we get some of these guys back and we can see what this looks like with our full complement of the roster of the 25 men we expected to have heading into the year. A day off today, they are taking on the Tigers tomorrow, a 5:40 first pitch with Kyle Harrison on the hill. Now, what direction do you want to go here? We can talk about the Bucks. We can talk a little bit about the NBA. Playoffs got underway. It was all home winners, all blowout, basically home winners, except for on Sunday. The Magic, the 8th seed, beat the Pistons. The Magic took my Hornets out. That, if you remember, was that on Friday last week? I had the Hornets at 3-1 to make the playoffs, and they had to win that game to get in. Now, I will say I made a smart move Friday night right before that game started, because when you have a one-game bet like that, where I made a future bet, but then it comes down to one game, and I had the Hornets at 3-1, so then I did a hedge, which is something a lot of gamblers do. The Magic were plus 120 that night to win the game outright, so they were home underdogs on Friday. But because I had a 3.1-1 ticket to win on the Hornets, I cleared my bet by betting on the Magic. So whatever money you put on the Hornets, you make it so you can win that amount of money on the Magic, if that makes sense. That's hedging. So okay, it takes a little bit off. If the Hornets would have won, I would have won less money than on Friday, but I still would have won a nice chunk of change. But I covered myself by betting on the Magic to win on Friday night so that even if they won, I would at least make my money back on the bet I laid down on the Hornets, and that's what happened. The Magic blew them out. And the Magic carried that momentum into beating Detroit, number 1 seed, 60-win Pistons. The Magic pretty much dominated them last night, 112-101. That was the only upset of the weekend, though. Every home team dominated in the NBA. But yeah, the Magic, they prevented me from a bigger payday on Friday. But I would say it was about half an hour before they tipped off Friday night. I thought, you know what I should do? I should probably do this. Hedging is no fun. Any degenerate gambler will tell you when you're in that situation where you've got a big ticket like that, a future ticket, and it comes down to one game, you almost always, the smart move is almost always hedging, so at least you cover the bet you laid down originally, which again is what I did. But it's no fun, right? You've got a 3-1 ticket, a 4-1 ticket, you want to win all that money. You want it all. And if you hedge, if the team you originally bet on wins, you're going to get less of a payout, but you cover yourself on the back end. So hedging is no fun, but it is smart. Like a lot of things in life. Like many things in life that are smart but not fun, hedging is smart but not fun. So I did at least cover that bet, so it was no harm, no foul on Friday. But the Magic were the only road team that got a win, beating the 1-seed Pistons pretty thoroughly in Detroit last night. Now let's talk about the Bucks. Giannis had some interesting news. We talked about it in the teaser. He talked about this on a podcast with Goran Dragic, former NBA player, spent his last handful of games in Milwaukee, spent a lot of time in Miami. He tormented the Bucks anytime they played him, but I think they're friends. They both are on the international scene. I think they became buddies. So Giannis was on his podcast. Giannis is filming this podcast as a side note at the Bucks training facility. Over his shoulder are the championship banners. I think it's a good thing. I don't know why that is. I don't know why I think that's a good thing, but I think it's a good thing for his potential future in Milwaukee that he's recording this podcast from the Bucks facilities and not from like his house or somewhere else, like he's disconnected from the organization already. So you see all the banners behind him, and he's talking about the year and how big of a mess it was, not just in terms of the wins and losses on the floor, the injuries, but then he gets to a point where he starts talking about the trade rumors and how this was the most intense any trade rumors revolving around him had been. And we've been over. There have been trade rumors about Giannis. Remember when we talked about, was it after the trade deadline when he stayed and we played there? I had that whole list of tweets from both Woj and Shams and other ESPN people. They've been tweeting about Giannis leaving Milwaukee since 2017. I mean, it's been relentless. But this year, and I will agree with Giannis, this year, to him it felt more real, and I think to the fans it felt more real, to the organization it felt more real. Even though they end up not trading him in the offseason, not trading him at the deadline, the rumors felt like they had more legitimacy to them. So here's a minute of Giannis talking about a regret he has that he didn't shut this down more emphatically as it gained steam during the season.
Like back in the day when I was younger, 25, 24, they would always say this stuff.
Yeah.
But then maybe like a week later, it will turn off. They will talk about the different story. This year, every day, social media, turn the TV on, First Take, ESPN, blah, 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 this, Giannis. And what I did, I had my family stayed in Greece, right? So, because also I wanted my family to, learn Greek and be around that culture. So I told them stay there because also there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I came here, I was locked in, but this was the first time in my NBA career that it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And I think if I'd ever been in that position, if I could chase something, maybe I come out and shut it down because I think people wasn't listening to me. Like I was saying, like, oh, Giannis, come out and act for a trade. Giannis, come out and do this. Giannis. I'm like, first of all, people that I respect and people that I love, I would have conversations with them, right? My coach, my GM.
Behind the closed door, of course,
Yeah, but I kept saying, like, I would say, guys, I'm here. I'm not going nowhere. Oh, yeah, whatever. Blah, blah. Giannis is going to the Knicks. Okay. 2 weeks later, I'm here, guys. I'm locked in. I got hurt, but I'm coming back to play here. Oh, Giannis is going to Miami. They wasn't listening to what I was saying, right?
Yeah.
So, if I could turn the time back, I would maybe say, come out a little bit earlier. It's like, hey, guys, this ends today. Look at me in my eyes. I'm staying with Milwaukee until further notices. Ends today. Stop, making stories and after stories and after stories. But
in his defense, he is, as he's retelling that, I do feel like, didn't we talk about every week, anytime, at some point on the podcast, I forget what episode, it was before the trade deadline, I feel like we were talking about Giannis and how anytime he's interviewed about this, he's saying, I'm staying here right now. This is where my mind is right now. I want to try to win this year and try to figure out how to make this team work better on the floor. And I feel like we threw out there, it doesn't matter what he says. If the rumors keep getting thrown out there, what is he going to do? Turn them down every single time, every post game, every post practice? You know what I mean? At some point, I feel like Giannis probably got tired of having to say, I'm staying, this is where I am, I want to try to make this work, this is where I am this season. And then another rumor would come out from Shams, and then he'd have to turn it down again. Then another rumor. And it just felt like at some point Giannis threw out his hands and said, no matter what I say, no matter how many times I say that I'm staying here, I could say it 1,000 times, then another rumor will come out, and I'll have to say it 1,001. And it felt like maybe he got fatigued with the amount of times that he had to deny these rumors and these stories. But now with, about a week or two, or well, for him, the season's been over ostensibly for the last month. And he has not played for the last month. So maybe now that we have a little bit more of that in the rearview mirror, I guess what he's saying is he should have been more emphatic or more demonstrative about it. But I don't know how much more emphatic he could have been. Anytime he talked to Eric Name of The Athletic, anytime he talked to Lori Nickel, anytime he talked to Jim Orzarski, all the local beat reporters, when they would bring to him, hey, Sham said this, ESPN said this, he said, no, I'm here. I'm under contract. I want to be here. I want to play with this team and try to figure this out. At some point, human nature is, if I tell you one thing and then another rumor out says the opposite, and I've got to tell you it again, and another rumor out comes out that says the opposite, I've got to tell you again, at some point, you're just going to throw your hands up and say, it doesn't matter what I say, because they're just going to keep saying that that's not true, and I'm tired of having to refute this. I feel like that's where Giannis got, but now maybe in the aftermath of the whole thing, like he said there, he should have been more emphatic or said it more clearly that he is staying in Milwaukee. But I thought that was interesting, whatever that was, an 80-second clip of him on a podcast this week talking about maybe things he could have done differently as the year kind of unraveled on the Bucks. I did get an email, and this was a published report. I got an email from our buddy Tyler, and Tyler said, are they going to let Horst actually make this coaching decision, ... and the link to the article. If this is true, I want to see him make the call. There was an article that was published on, where is this? Behind the Buck Pass. I don't know how legitimate this is. Dalton Snell's a pretty good Bucks reporter, though. And the article basically says that the year they fired Budenholzer, so they're the number one seed in the NBA. I still can't believe that was only 3 years ago. The number one seed in the NBA, 58 wins, all paths to an NBA title go through Milwaukee in 2023. They get upset by Jimmy Butler and the Heat, and then all hell breaks loose. We have to do something. It was a historic upset, an 8-1. We were the favorites. We're out in 5 games. It's not even like that series was a 7-game series. They were out in 5 games. And the Giannis back injury is a big part of that, but still. Even without Giannis, or even with part-time Giannis, going into that series, you felt like that was one you should win. So then you get this catastrophic outcome, and everybody feels like we've got to do something. We've got to fire Bud. We've got to make a big trade. We've got to break up the roster. We've got to freshen this thing up. They fire Bud. They hire Adrian Griffin. Then they fire him, and they bring in Doc. They make the trade, get Drew out of here, bring in Dame, which I still stand by. You make that 100 times out of 100. But the article says John Horst reportedly, when they fired Bud, he wanted to hire Nick Nurse, who won a title in Toronto. That was the year that they came back and beat the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2019. And then they beat the Warriors, an injured Warriors team, but they beat the Warriors in the finals. And that offseason, the Raptors fired him in 21, I think, or 22. And then that offseason, he ends up getting hired by the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, the Sixers have not been world beaters since Nurse has been there, but they've had injury problems. But they're a playoff team, and they're a playoff team this year. They're a team that's winning mid to upper 40s the last couple of years since he's been there. They're a more relevant team right now than the Bucks are, especially this year. He wanted to hire Nick Nurse. I do remember at that time, Giannis does not like Nick Nurse for whatever reason. Maybe it does stem from something that happened during that 2019 playoff series. I don't know. Because Nurse was sort of the architect of the wall. Remember that? You have to build the wall. Remember that phrasing? Where Giannis was so good at bullying his way into the lane. Teams, starting with Toronto and Nick Nurse, they built the wall where they had to put as many forwards kind of in the paint as possible to prevent Giannis from doing that and force other people to beat him. And then they were really physical with him, too. I don't know if it's fallout from that. That's a reason he didn't want to play for Nick Nurse. But undeniably, Nick Nurse would have been a better move than Adrian Griffin. At this point, we can say that pretty comfortably. But I guess Horst wanted Nick Nurse, and instead, the Bucks went with Adrian Griffin, How much influence did Giannis have there? It kind of sounds like he didn't want Nick Nurse, so then they looked around and said, all right, let's just hire this guy. Let's hire Adrian Griffin. Maybe that was a Wes Edens move. And then when they learned or figured out that Adrian Griffin wasn't going to be the guy in the middle of the year, John Horst reportedly wanted to hire Kenny Atkinson. They didn't do that, and they instead parachuted in Doc Rivers. Kenny Atkinson has gone on to Cleveland. They won 60 games last year, were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, and then got upset by the Pacers in the second round by Tyrese Halliburton. And this year, they're the 3 seed, I think, or the 4 seed. They won 50 games. They've got James Harden. They have the second best odds to win the Eastern Conference. I think they're just behind Boston in terms of favorites. They're even higher than the Pistons, the number 1 seed. So he has had a lot of success there. And Kenny Atkinson is a former lead assistant in Golden State with Steve Kerr. He did have a bad cup of coffee in Brooklyn where he spent 2 years, I think, there that did not go well. But he was a big name that was back out there in the coaching cycle, and they didn't go with him and they went with Doc instead. So if that's true, if that report is true that John Horst wanted Nick Nurse, they said, we're going to go with Adrian Griffin. And then when they had a second chance to listen to Horst, and he had Kenny Atkinson, who has been really, really good in Cleveland, they said, we're going to go with Doc Rivers. If that report is true, then yes, I would agree. I would like to see John Horst make this next coaching move and not have it be meddled with by ownership. You know, I'm starting to think, it's always dangerous. I'm starting to think the more podcasts that we've talked about the aftermath of that 23 season and the problems with the ownership group and Mark Lazary selling his stake after the 23 season, it's almost like Lazary was the canary in the coal mine here, where he kind of saw that things weren't going well. Reportedly, his relationship with Edens was kind of dissolving, and he just got out. And now we have the reports of Edens, the company he's running. He's lost half of his net worth. Jimmy Haslam comes in. Edens still is at the governorship. He's still in control. But his relationship with Giannis isn't what it was, and Giannis had a better relationship with Lazary and Peter Fagan. We talked about that in the last podcast. I am starting to think, if we're doing like a Law & Order SVU or an NCIS show here, I am starting to think that Wes Edens might be the primary problem. He might be patient zero. And the way that this whole thing has gone, and Edens, when you go back to the early years where they bought the team, he was at a lot of games. He was at all the games in the 2021 run. I remember after they had the Valley-Oop, he was in the front row on the baseline, and he was turning around and waving goodbye to the Suns fans. That was kind of a funny moment. But it does feel like, as his business enterprises have kind of fell apart, and as the franchise has kind of been falling off a little bit, and now a lot of it this year, he's not as in the forefront as he used to be. He's not at as many games. He's not talking as much. The biggest piece of news we heard from Wes Edens was the one we talked about a few months ago, where he said, point blank, if Giannis doesn't sign the contract extension, then he is going to get traded this offseason. But that's really the first time we've heard from Edens. And then when you kind of hear about what's going on with his company behind the scenes and refinancing $5 billion of debt, which sounds like a disaster, I'm starting to wonder if the Wes Edens component here, it feels like he's probably the guy that overruled John Horst on bringing in Griffin and listening to Giannis maybe there, and overruled him on Kenny Atkinson, because who else would have done that if not for Edens sitting in the governorship seat? I'm beginning to believe that that might be the primary problem. And we talked about Giannis this year went out of his way several times to talk about ownership, how they used to be at games, how they used to be more in the forefront, and they used to be forward-facing, and that hasn't been the case this year when things are down. And Giannis seemed agitated about that. I am starting to believe the relationship between Wes Edens and the franchise that he co-owns, that he's a majority owner for, and the team and Giannis, I wonder if those relationships haven't fallen off quite a bit, and he is dealing with more behind-the-scenes business issues than he wants to talk about. I feel like this could be the primary problem. I might be wrong, but just the more we discuss this topic and the more you look at the timeline and his business ventures and his governorship seat, I'm starting to think Wes Edens might be an issue here. But that was an article that was out this week, and I would agree with Tyler. If that is true, if we believe that Horst would have gone with Nurse over Griffin, and then we believe that he would have gone with Atkinson over Rivers, both of those would have been better moves, then yes, whenever it is that they hire a coach here, I would like John Horst to be in charge of the hiring committee, and I would like to have him have final say on the coach, and then live or die with the consequences of that going forward. Remember, Horst just signed a contract extension. And yes, his draft picks have been bad. And they can't, if they make this pick this year, if they stay at 9 or 10 and they don't trade it or package it and they keep the pick and they use this pick as a foundational block to either put with Giannis or to be a foundational block along with whatever they would get for Giannis, I think it's right to have a raised eyebrow given John Horst's draft history allowing him to make this pick. But beyond that, even though the Dame trade didn't work out, you make it 100 times out of 100. He made the trade that brought Drew to Milwaukee. That brings them a championship. He's been really good, as we talked about, with those two-way guys, finding the diamonds in the rough, like Ryan Rollins, like Pete Nance, like Cormac Ryan at the end of the year. He's been very good at that. For as bad as he has been at actually drafting guys, finding rookie free agents, he's been excellent at that. So he just signed a contract extension heading into this year. He's going to be around, I guess. I mean, they could fire him, obviously, but he sounds like he's going to be around for the next 3 or 4 years. If that's the case, let him make the call. Let him hire his coach that's going to coach the team that he is going to build, and then let that sink or swim on its own. If he lands on somebody, let's just let him go with that. And then if it's bad, then you can use him and say, okay, now we've got to move on from John Horst because he made a bad coaching decision and the roster didn't kind of fill in the way we thought it would, and you move on from him then. But if those are true, if that story is true, and he was overruled not once but twice on what would have been better coaching decisions, let's let the general manager, I know this is an insane thought, let's let the general manager pick the coach, let's let the general manager pick the players, and see how it all comes together when it's just him making the call. Because it feels like ownership is overruling him on big decisions, and whenever ownership overrules the GM so far, especially as it relates to coaching, it has not worked out. But if you believe that article, I do concur with Tyler that, okay, let him make the call, and let's see what happens if you actually let John Horst make this decision. But other than that, there have not been any real rumblings of interviews or guys they want to bring in other than what we talked about with Taylor Jenkins and maybe Darvin Ham and some of those other guys. But there has not been any real momentum one way or the other as of yet. And I don't think there will be. I think it will be until May until we really dive into legitimate interviews and getting a feel for what direction they're going to go there. But I thought that was an interesting article, and the Giannis clip I thought was intriguing as well. Now let's talk about Badger basketball. What a weekend for Greg Gard. They did it, everybody. Remember we talked about, we had the emailer, I forget where it is. I'm not going to be able to find it. We had the emailer after they lost to High Point in the tournament. And another disappointing March for Greg Gard, where you win 25 games in the regular season, you're really good in Big Ten play, you beat Purdue on the road, you beat Michigan on the road, you beat all these really good teams, you beat Illinois twice, and then you lose to High Point. And remember we talked about one thing maybe they need to adjust moving forward. We had that emailer suggest that one blind spot for Greg Gard in the portal and in recruiting is finding a forward or a center that is more rebounding focused, that is more defensive minded, because Gard loves these stretch forwards. He loves those 7-footers, those 6'10", 6'11 guys that can shoot. That's Nolan Winter. That's Austin Rapp. That was Bielauskas before Bielauskas left the program. That was Nate Reavers. Remember Nate Reavers back in the day? That was, who am I thinking of? Remember I made fun of him. Stephen Crowell, who was fine. He was fine. But that's the MO. Those are the guys that Gard loves to get as forwards, guys that can stretch the floor, they can knock down threes, but they're not necessarily the best rebounders, and they're not a rim deterrent. Remember we discussed that? They're not guys that are going to strike fear into you. If you're a guard and you're dribble penetrating, there's not this 6'10", 6'11", 7-foot shot blocker with length that you're worried about at the rim. And even though Winter hasn't been maybe as bad as I made it out to be, they just haven't had a guy like that in a while. Remember, we had that whole conversation of who was the last really good defensive center, and we kind of landed on Frank Kaminsky. We had one of our listeners, AJ, he said Greg Steamsma. There was somebody I forgot that we hit on when we came back. Ethan Happ. Ethan Happ was a pretty good rim defender. He was more of a 6'9", 6'10 guy, not as big, but he was a good defender. But they really haven't had that. And maybe that is a blind spot for Greg Gard, and maybe that's something they need to seek out in this recruiting class or in this transfer portal, and they did it. They did exactly that. So they make 2 moves over the weekend. We talked on the Friday podcast. They got Tyler Autry from George Washington, a guard who averaged 11 points per game, shot almost 40% from beyond the arc. So that's another guy with some upside from a mid-major. Look, you've got to replace Blackwell. You've got to replace Nick Boyd. That was probably one of the best, if not the best, backcourt combos in all of college basketball last year, with Blackwell and Boyd averaging combined, 42 or 43 points a game. So you've got a lot to replace there. Trey Autry they got on Friday, and then they sign over the weekend 6'10" forward Victory Onwuetu, I think is how you say it. Onwuetu. Onwuetu. Victory Onwuetu. And this is a guy, 6'10". He's a forward. He's got some length. He rebounds 7 boards a game. He only played 17, 18 minutes a game. I think he'll see more playing time for the Badgers, but 7 boards a game, a block a game. He was a big part of Hofstra getting back to the NCAA tournament this year. They lost to Alabama in round 1. I had him winning that game. He started 17 of 35 games this year. Yeah, he was about 20 minutes per game. But that's a pretty good number. 7 rebounds per game if you're only playing 19 or 20 minutes a game is a pretty good number. And a block per game is too. But I just thought it was interesting that we talked about that on the podcast. Do we have a podcast listener? Is Greg Gard a podcast listener? Like, rate, and subscribe, Greg, if you can. Also, I'm sorry about some of the mean things I said about you. I'm sorry about the fire guard gauge. But it is interesting that one of our emailers brought that up, that maybe this is something they need to be more invested in, getting a forward who is just all he does is rebound and block shots and score at the rim, and he is not worried about taking threes. Victory Onuetu did not take a single 3 last year for Hofstra. So this is the exact archetype that we were talking about in the post-mortem of the Badger season. So they get him, and then the bigger news over the weekend, they get one of the prized guards in the transfer portal. Ian Elmer is coming to Madison. He played for Miami of Ohio. Now remember, Miami of Ohio last year was sort of an interesting subplot, in that they were undefeated for a lot of the regular season, but their schedule was so weak. So it was interesting where you had this team, Miami of Ohio, the Redhawks. They were 27-0, 28-0, 29-0, 30-0, and Lenardi had them barely getting in on bracketology because they just had no strength of schedule on the schedule they were playing. And they end up being one of the play-in tournament teams, and they win that game, and then I think they lost in the opening round after that. But he was a big part of that team, Ian Elmer. He averaged 13 points per game, kind of in that same range Nick Boyd was when he came to Madison last year. And he shot 50% from the field as a guard and 43% from beyond the arc. This is one of the biggest guard names in the portal, and the Badgers got him. So you get Ian Elmer, you get Trey Autry to try to rebuild that backcourt, and you finally get a tall forward, a taller center with length who can defend the rim and grab some rebounds. I thought a big weekend for Greg Gard and the Badgers. With all the other crap going on in the athletic department with Chris McIntosh and the Luke Fickell press conference, which just still made me mad all weekend. What are you still mad about, honey? Luke Fickell, that press conference. But with all that other stuff going on, Greg Gard just going about his business and getting some guys that are going to fill in the gaps of the guys he's losing from last year to the portal. It is just interesting to me again, and we've talked about this with Greg Gard. I can't believe how well he's adapted to this new era of college sports. It didn't feel like he was going to be a guy that was going to be able to do that. And you lose a guy like Blackwell, and Nick Boyd graduates, and Bielauskis, who had some upside as a freshman forward, you lose him, and all of a sudden you're thinking, oh my God, we're losing half the team. And Greg Gard didn't panic at all. He went and got a 6'10 forward. He got a couple of guards that average double figures and shoot well from beyond the arc and are going to fit well in the system. He got one of the best guards in the portal. He just kind of moves forward and doesn't flinch. Barry Alvarez always said that, don't flinch. He didn't flinch. Gard just filled those spots. There are still guys that are going to come in, and there's more to do, but it was a big weekend for Badger basketball, getting some big pickups in the transfer portal. All right, let's talk finally today. I guess we can talk Packer draft. We're going to talk more about the Packer draft on Friday, right? Because they don't make a pick Thursday unless they trade up back in the first round. Sometimes I say things. Sometimes we say things on this podcast. I don't think that is likely, but I guess in theory they could. But, yeah, the draft is this week. It doesn't feel like it. I don't know. I think it's probably because the Packers don't have a first-round pick, so you're not getting as much conversation about it. They gave up the first-round pick to get Micah Parsons, so you knew you weren't going to have that. So there's no Thursday night pick this year for the Packers. Also, I do wonder if we're still kind of on the come-down from the draft being in Green Bay. Remember, last year at this time, for weeks and weeks and weeks leading up to the draft, that's all anybody could talk about because it was in Titletown. How are they going to pull this thing off? Are there going to be enough bathrooms? Double up. Double up. Will there be enough bathrooms and food for everybody and parking and hotels? And Green Bay was just bracing itself for this massive event and this crush of humanity that we were talking about the draft. And when we finally got to the Monday of the week, we were all revved up. I was going up there and getting media passes and parking passes, got a behind-the-scenes look, met up with some buddies. I mean, we were having a great time. I wonder if because we're the first year now after it's done, and I know that's a year ago, but I just wonder if because of how big of a deal it was last year, it just doesn't have that same feel this year because it's not in Green Bay, it's in Pittsburgh this year. But it is draft week, and actually voluntary. You can go or not go if you want. Voluntary workouts, wink. They start for the Packers today. So a lot of guys are going to be in Green Bay today for voluntary workouts, and they'll be taking part in that. But yeah, the draft in Pittsburgh on Thursday. Right now, no first-round pick for the Packers. How many do they end up with? I guess we can close the Big Willie style tab. Green Bay Packer draft picks 2026. So they'll have 2 picks on Friday, the second and third rounders. Yeah, number 52 and number 84 overall. They've got 1 second, 1 third, 1 fourth. They've got 2 fifths. One of those is the Dontavian Wicks pick coming back from Philly. They've got 1 sixth and 2 sevenths. They get a 7th round compensatory pick at the end of the draft as well. So they do end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 picks in the draft, but no first round pick. I would think it's a combo of those two things. The fact that we're not in Green Bay this year, obviously, and how big of a deal that was a year ago, and the fact that you don't have a first round pick because of the Parsons trade, I would think that kind of combines to a point where when I came into work this morning, I was going through some show prep, and I thought, the draft is this week. I didn't even really think about it. But that'll be coming up Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Pittsburgh, and the Packers will not have a pick until Friday night for the second and third round. I would think, I know it's, if you had to pick a position that they're going to go in, secondary, right? I feel like we've talked about cornerbacks and offensive linemen every year for the last 20 years, but it remains a need for this team. Now, they made some moves during the offseason to shore up the secondary a bit, but I'm pretty sure Keyshawn Nixon's still your number one corner. So you probably need a corner. No offense to Keyshawn Nixon, but my feeling is if Keyshawn Nixon is your number one corner and the draft is this week, you probably need to draft a corner and find somebody there. But I would think secondary and offensive line, you can never have enough offensive linemen. Hopefully this year the offensive line comes together better than it did last year. Remember we talked about that a few podcasts ago where that was one of the problems the Packers had. Aaron Banks didn't play that well. The Jenkins to center thing didn't work out. Rasheed Walker was meh at left tackle. Injury to Zach Tom. It just never... They didn't really ever get the preferred 5 they wanted out there consistently to begin with because of injuries. But even when it did, it just didn't look that good. So you've got to hope for more consistency and better performance there. Maybe you draft a tackle. I mean, you can never have enough tackles, like left-handed relievers. You can never have enough tackles. I would think secondary and offensive line and maybe edge rusher because you're not going to have Micah. I know Micah thinks he's coming back in September. He's not. He's probably coming back early October, and even then, I don't think we can expect. It wouldn't be reasonable. Now, I know being an NFL fan and a podcaster and a blogger, the term reasonable is never really used with those things. Let's say Micah comes back week 5, first week in October or second week in October. It probably is not reasonable to expect that Micah Parsons is going to hop right back in and be Micah Parsons. It's probably going to take him a little bit. So we're probably not going to see full-on Micah back until the middle of the year. And now you moved on from Rashawn Gary, which is fine. He did nothing for you the second half of the year. Now he goes to Dallas. But what else do you have there? I mean, you've got Lucas Van Ness. I mean, is this year 4? The year that Van Ness breaks out? I would say it's pretty rare for a guy to break out. He's been fine, but I would say it's pretty rare for a guy to break out in year 4. Is this the year he stays healthy and kind of lives up to the billing of being that first-round pick? You've got a couple other pieces there, but I would think edge rusher might be high on their list too. But secondary, if you had me make a position pick for the second-round pick on Friday, I would think secondary. We'll talk more about that on the Friday podcast, but that is coming up this week, and it kind of snuck up on us. Now, finally today, I just want to play you a clip of hockey from yesterday. So the NHL playoffs also got started. Of course, I just clicked X instead of clicking on the tab. John, good Lord. Anyway, the NHL playoffs and the NBA playoffs started this weekend. And while I'm not fully following the NHL playoffs until we get to the second round or maybe the conference finals, and then at some point I will pick a Stanley Cup winner. We're going to pick a future bet to make there. But the Buffalo Sabres are in the playoffs for the first time in 15 years. And I think there's a lot of crossover between Sabres fans and Bills fans. Obviously, Buffalo Bills, Buffalo Sabres. I'm not sure how much of Bills Mafia bleeds into the Sabres. Like, are people throwing people through flaming tables at Sabres pregame tailgate parties? I don't know. Maybe they are. But the point of it is the Sabres have not been in the playoffs for a long time. First playoff game since 2011. And they're hosting it. And they're down 2-0 to the Bruins in the third period with 8 minutes left. Down 2-0 with 8 minutes left. And then out of nowhere, Buffalo unleashes a torrent of goals. They score 4 goals in 5 game minutes, and the crowd is going absolutely crazy. This is the goal that put them ahead. So they scored 2, and then with 3 minutes left, here's the go-ahead goal.
He gets a handoff. Here's a pass. A shot. Score!
Listen to that crowd. That crowd pop. This is like Stone Cold Steve Austin coming out in 1999 on Raw.
Gets a handoff. Here's a pass. A shot. Score! Martin Samuelson.
It is unhinged.
Absolute madness.
And you get it. If you're a fan of the Sabres, you haven't been to the playoffs in 15 years, and you're down 2-0. It looks like you're going to lose game one at home, and then in the span of 5 or 6 game minutes, they score 4 goals, and you are absolutely unglued.
Here's a pass, a shot, score!
You get goosebumps.
Martin Samuelson! Absolute madness!
It's chaos. And they showed they had a whole watch party outside of the arena like the Bucks did with the Deer District in 2021, and they were going nuts, and they knocked over the railing that was holding them back. It was a mess, but in a good way. But I saw those clips making the rounds this morning. I thought, my God, that crowd pop is amazing. By the way, it was WrestleMania weekend this past weekend. I'm really sad for 13, 14, for 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old Jonathan. I'm very sad that I had no idea it was WrestleMania weekend. I feel like I've let him down, but I've let down 14-year-old John in a lot of ways. 13 and 14-year-old John would be miffed at why we're not calling NBA playoff games on NBC this weekend. What happened? What happened to us? Oh, 13-year-old Jonathan. I have a lot to tell you. And it's not a lot of it's good. Not a lot of it's good news. We have a podcast. We have that. But I was so into it when I was a kid. WrestleMania weekend, getting the pay-per-view. At that time, you had no idea you'd order a pay-per-view. Who knew if you'd even get it? It was 50-50. But it was WrestleMania weekend, 2 nights of WrestleMania, and it never crossed my radar. So I'm sorry. 14-year-old Jonathan, 41-year-old John let you down. I'm sorry for that. But that was a major, wrestling crowd pop. I was amazed by that. Yeah, we'll have to pick. Once we get past, because hockey is one of those sports where I feel pretty confident about where we're going to end up with the final 4 teams in the NBA. There may be some upsets like that Detroit loss yesterday. There's going to be stuff like that, but in a best-of-7 series, it feels like you kind of know in the NBA, the Celtics are going to be there, the Thunder are going to be there, the Spurs are probably going to be there, maybe the Cavs in the East, maybe the Pistons will figure it out. But you feel pretty good about the 4 or 5 teams that are going to be there. In the NHL, even the heaviest favorites might get swept in the first round. It is one of the most chaotic, unpredictable playoff formats or sports that there is. So I will probably wait until we get closer to the conference finals to pick a future winner for the Stanley Cup where we can get it at 4-1 or 5-1, something like that. But we'll wait on that for a little bit. All right, that'll do it for us here on your Monday morning. We'll get back after it Friday. We'll be talking about the draft and coming out of round 1 and what the Packers might do on Friday night in rounds 2 and 3. We'll recap the Brewer week in Detroit. Any Bucks news or any forward movement on a coach, maybe we will discuss that too if we get there on Friday. Have a happy, safe work week. We'll chat with you then.